Look, thank you all for being here. And I'm sorry that I have to be here under these conditions. But I want to reiterate to people that the relationship between the United States and Kosovo is between the people of our countries. And that is strong, and that won't change. And we are still going to be your strongest supporter in the international community. We're committed to your independence, your sovereignty, your security, and your economic prosperity. And when I engage with people around the country and Kosovans who come to Washington, I'm constantly reminded about the tremendous opportunities there are between our two countries and the tremendous opportunities that exist in this country alone as a startup culture, as an entrepreneurial culture, as one that's going to be a job creator in the future inside of Europe. So that's what I'm focused on. And I hope that people understand that any current difficulties that we have with the Prime Minister don't affect that sentiment. But we do have some challenges in the bilateral relationship in dealing with the Prime Minister. And I'll be very honest, the United States has been your biggest supporter. And it pains me to see that people think that somehow we're leading the relationship and our engagement with Kosovo for the benefit of Serbia. I want to remind people, Serbia was against your independence in 2008, and we went forward. They were against our recognition campaign throughout the years, and we went forward. Even on this, they were against Council of Europe, and we went forward. They were against the elections, and we saw them as a legitimate function. They were against the result, and we said that the elections were free and fair. So when we asked the government to think about how they would move forward after that, and we gave some concrete suggestions, we're puzzled at why they would think that somehow we're the adversary. And I'll give you an example. I mean, I've been with the federal government, and what we really were saying was, let's not inflame already delicate situations. And it was an insistence on going in by force to have mayors go into a particular building. I've been with the U.S. government since I was 19 years old. I started out in the military. And I have seen the U.S. government abandon federal buildings for floods, fires, hurricanes, COVID, and even protests. And nobody ever questioned the legitimacy and the authority of the U.S. government. So why these buildings, why under these conditions, why after we had asked them for coordination, even though we stand behind them, that they wouldn't coordinate, means that it's saying something to us about how they see us as a partner. And that has had consequences. And I have seen people use the word sanctions. It's not sanctions. We're seeing the choices are being made in spite of our partnership. And that is a signal to us. We can't not accept that as a signal. So at some point, when we want to reestablish that coordination and that partnership with this government, we stand ready, because we will always stand with the people of Kosovo. And that doesn't mean we have to stand with an individual who doesn't share that instinct to cooperate and to coordinate. And I have to say, we are fully confused, but fully united with the European Union, your closest allies, on why this is happening, why there is this lack of coordination and lack of flexibility and political vision to move past this and go forward on the opportunities that are presented in the normalization agreement.
I have questions, Mr. Escobar, about the relation, not the relation with the people of Kosovo, the relation with the government of Kosovo, which is the relation between the government of Kosovo and the United States.
Yes.
Is it damaged?
Well, look, I'm going to tell you one thing. It's not the United States. It's the entire transatlantic community. So it's not us. It's not the 27 countries of the European Union and the United States and UK. We see things the same way. We're supportive. It's coming from somewhere else. And yes, it could have lasting impact.
I wanted to ask a question, is there any time frame for the creation of the association? And what is the United States expecting from Kosovo, Prime Minister and Serbian President, if they don't do that?
Well, look, first of all, the European Union was very clear that if you accept this, the path to Europe is much faster. If you don't accept it, you're rejecting Europe. So this is a European process. That's the dialogue, a European roadmap. That is the basic agreement. And with the European Union as the arbiter. So if you turn your back on this agreement, you turn your back on Europe, with all of the consequences that come with it. All of the instability in the relationship, the lack of financing, and the lack of movement. And so that's exactly what it means. So we're hoping we don't get there because, you know, the benefits are so huge. Every country that's entered the European Union is more prosperous, more democratic, and richer, and more stable. So that by itself, if you look at your neighbors, if you look at where Croatia and Slovenia and every other country that's entered the European Union in the last 25 years is, you cannot deny that the benefits are real. So that's what we hope people understand, is that that's the solution to all of this.
Mr. Escobar, what is your comment to the current campaign launched by Pristina that the only culpable is Serbia, as Putin's rally, and as it seems that this is the way how the Prime Minister is trying to defuse the situation? Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. I think, you know, Russia has taken advantage of it. Russia benefits from it. But Russia is not directing this. Let's be honest. This is a failure of political leadership on both sides to move forward on interethnic reconciliation. Full stop. So, you know, we have all the goodwill in the world to get Serbia and Kosovo to a good place, to a not necessarily friendly, but a peaceful relationship between them, a normalized relationship to them, and one that brings them closer to Europe. That's what we want.
Is it a must to have the association up and running before the new elections in the north, or parties can discuss association after the new mayors, after the new elections are there, and what happens in the meantime?
Well, look, I'll leave the sequencing to the European Union. You can ask Mr. Lajčák. Our position is that the agreement needs to be immediately realized. For Kosovo, their only due out is the association. Now, we can't ignore the association. It's in the Brussels Agreement, the Ohrid Agreement, in the European Council conclusions. And so it's going to happen. The question is, with whom? You know, and how long do we have to wait? I think we can have, we know what the association should look like. We know what it shouldn't look like. So we just need to start now. We could have a statute in one day if we wanted to. So I don't understand the delay either. So for me, again, it is for Kosovo not to define itself by Serbia, but to define itself by its own values, by its relationship not to the 6 million people of Europe, of Serbia, but to the 700 million people of the Euro-Atlantic community. That's what we want. We want you to define yourself that way. And yet, whenever we talk to this Prime Minister and his Deputy Prime Minister, all they want to talk about is Serbia. We want to talk about greater integration. So with the association, on European terms, on the protection of minority rights, I have a platform on which I can go to other European countries and say, they've done everything asked. So we need to move forward on greater benefits for Kosovo. Now, I can't get there if Kosovo doesn't do its part of the agreement.
So you came here with a mission, and your mission has a timetable.
Yes.
You will probably leave today or tomorrow. So what will you call mission accomplished, and what will you call a failure? And what if we have results? What are the next steps?
Yes.
If we see failure, what will be the consequences?
We do see a way forward. The European Union has presented a way forward, which is immediate de-escalation. And that would involve a plan for mayors, not necessarily to have to work in those buildings while the tensions are so high. And like I said, in the United States, we have a lot of experience in doing that. And we tried to share that experience in our vision of that. I can tell you personally that I was working in a federal building in San Francisco in 1991 when they had protests against the Gulf War. And they shut down a federal building that had prosecutors, FBI, and other federal institutions. They just moved to a different building, and they kept working. And no one said that we gave our sovereignty to that crowd. Not at all. So one is the de-escalation. The second is we'd like to see new elections with the participation of Serbs. And third, we need to move immediately to the implementation of the Ohrid Agreement, which means we need to see a real effort by Kosovo to engage on the association, and we also need to see steps taken by Serbia. So that has to be done now, and we have to agree on that today and tomorrow, because on Friday, both Miroslav and I are being asked to give reports to our respective superiors as to whether we are successful or not.
What with the failure part?
Well,
what will be the consequences for Kosovo,
for
institutions, for
For
government?
Kosovo, look, you know, what it'll send a powerful signal that Kosovo is not interested in coordinating with us. I think that would be unfortunate. And by the way, not Kosovo, the Prime Minister. I want to make it very clear that we don't see this as having an impact on the long-term relationship. But the actions taken or not taken could have some consequences that will affect parts of the relationship. I don't want to get there.
Analysts in Kosovo familiar with developments here have stated that Pristina is being put under a lot of pressure regarding the developments in northern municipalities, while they see Belgrade as the main source of destabilization. Do you agree to this point of view? And do you see any time that Serbia can be faced with similar penalties, let's say, or sanctions if it doesn't cooperate on
Well, look,
de-escalating?
I'm going to start by saying the obvious. We don't have the same relationship with Serbia that we do with Kosovo. We don't see Serbia is not a candidate for NATO. They are having a challenging time in their European integration. We expected Kosovo to be much further along. And the amount of money that we use to support your institutions, including your security through K4, means that we have a different relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't hold Serbia to account for some of the things that are happening. And we asked them, we have made it very clear that attacks on K4 are unacceptable. We have made it very clear that we believe that Serbs should participate in the joint institutions, that they should participate in the elections. And that was a clear signal that we said the election is going to happen. So, and in the meantime, everything we've done has benefited Kosovo. Our position on integration, our position on holding the elections, our position on recognizing the elections. So I really am challenged to figure out why people think that we're appeasing Serbia. So given all of the support that Kosovo's gotten over the even last month. Now, part of the challenges here is a long-term lack of trust between the Serbian minority community and this government. Now, I really do want to highlight a letter that was presented to the Quint by 100 and some members of civil society, people who want to live here, who want to integrate, talking about how they feel, how this government makes them feel as second-class citizens. I encourage you to read that letter, because it really does say that it is not a black and white situation. There are people who would like to be, who have already made the choice to remain in Kosovo when they could have left, and yet they are struggling to make their voice heard. That is fundamentally a challenge for a multi-ethnic civic democracy to address. And you can't say, well, all Serbs are for us or against us, or helpful or unhelpful. There are a lot of competing voices in that community that need to be heard. And there are a lot of concerns that they have about access to government services, about expropriations, about the conduct of some members of the police force. They have to be heard. There are uncomfortable voices to hear and uncomfortable messages to receive, but that's part of the underlying problem, and we want to see that addressed as well.
Questions about the association.
Yeah.
What should Kosovo do concretely, Mr. Escobar? What steps should
They must immediately present a draft of a law that would bring it into being now.
No.
Immediately. And they have one. They just won't put it forward.
Are you aware of an enormous amount of ethnic hatred on both of the sides?
Oh, yes.
And are you aware are we in a dangerous situation that this conflict can further escalate into real violence clash between the communities?
I do.
And what are the lessons learned?
Well, look, I'll tell you one thing. If there's one thing that the United States is focused on, it's focused on the next generation. And so, I think in places like Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially where you see the continuation of politics of ethnic rivalry, the politicians through populism and nationalism contribute to that, and that is their only message to the people. So that is unfortunate, and I have always been hoping that we could emerge from that period of the 90s where that was the acceptable form of political discourse. I don't think we're there yet, but we need to leave that period behind. We need to start talking not about ethnic division, but about interethnic reconciliation and about the things that unite us. Now, when I started this job, one of the things that I really was keen about was the economic integration of the region, because it is, if you invest in a Kosovan worker, you're going to get 10 years on average more of productivity from that worker. You have things to offer the international community, not just Europe, but also your neighbors, including Serbia. And unfortunately, we have been in crisis mode, and Jeff, his whole time here has been about crisis mode. So there are certain politicians who want to keep us in crisis because it keeps them in power and it keeps them rich.
Just do you rule out any possibility of further ethnic conflict?
Well,
what are the lessons learned?
Well, here's the lesson learned. Now, the interesting thing is, the people on the ground want to live normal lives. They have moved on, and they're ready for reconciliation. The other is that the international community is not going to let a conflict happen again. And so you have peacekeeping forces both here and in BIH, the two places that are the most challenging in terms of ethnic reconciliation. So now, those who are partners with us in moving the countries further along the European path to fight corruption and to build interethnic trust, they're going to get our support. Those who don't are not.
Is the United States willing to organize an international conference similar to Dayton conference?
We did. It was Ohrid.
It was not Dayton.
No, it was not. It was pretty close. It was pretty close. What you got was a normalization agreement on European terms that requires Serbia to recognize your territorial integrity, your sovereignty, your administrative control of the whole country with the force of international law, recognize your flag, your national symbols, your diplomas, your passports, your government documents, and not block Kosovo in its integration efforts in any international organization. Now, and there are some who have said that Serbia's already violated that. But the other side was Kosovo was to immediately embark on discussions of the association, which it did not. So either both of you are in violation or neither. Mm-hmm. Now, the European Union is said legally, we're not sure because we don't have a sequencing plan yet agreed. So they're not sure whether it kicked in or not legally. From our perspective, the political declaration of the agreement was sufficient to trigger it, and therefore both of you are in violation. So, do we need another conference? No, we need implementation of what's already been agreed.
Is there anything that U.S. can do to make sure that Serbs participate in the new elections in the north, and we do not have a scenario similar to the ones we had, that the elections are organized and then 3% turnout? In
coordination with our European partners, we're working on that.
And you're working with Belgrade on that?
That is the same message we're going to deliver. Serbs should be present in the institutions. They should participate in the elections, and without preconditions. Now, we understand that after they are elected, they're going to have a legitimate voice to raise concerns that they have. And they have legitimate concerns, as I was saying before.
So if we're going to see a situation when we need to have which is approval to have elections in Kosovo, then we can say that a president of another country has a right to veto when the other country can have elections on their own. Otherwise, they cannot have elections.
Right. Well, and that is exactly why we need the association. So from our perspective, is the association is a way to unwind Serbia's control of the North and put it under Kosovan control, under your constitution, under your legal structure. So I see it as an opportunity to move forward. I don't understand why anybody would see it differently, because the association at the end of the day, even though it was negotiated between Serbia and Kosovo, it's not necessarily a concession to Serbia. It is an acknowledgement of the needs of a minority community. I'll tell you right now, I am somewhat a recipient, beneficiary of something like an association. My mother votes in Spanish. She gets her driver's license in Spanish. She gets her medical care in Spanish. And it doesn't threaten the constitutionality of the United States. That's the model that I would like to see for the association. It's really about providing municipal services to people in their own language in a way that they can understand. That's
If I
it.
can
Yeah.
add,
Yeah.
but to make comparisons, we have Serbia, who is trying to mingle in internal
Yes.
jobs of Bosnia, of Montenegro, of Macedonia,
Very true.
and Kosovo. So the comparison with your family story is not the same.
No,
You have
it's,
Serbia
no, but
there.
no, look, I understand. And so the whole point is, well, once we have those elements established of what it is, then what we have, people say, well, do you trust Vučić? Well, the question is not about trust, it's about legally binding obligations. So if we have an obligation that all the support for any institution that does Serbian healthcare, education, cultural support, sports, coming from Serbia must go through a transparent process through the Kosovan government, then we will have that obligation enforced.
As we all know now, Kosovo is suspended from Defender Europe 23, and that has raised a lot of concerns, a lot of debate here about new measures that might be put in place if Kosovo doesn't show constructive engagement. You talked shortly about constructive engagement, what does it mean, but what other consequences
Well, look,
we
I mean,
might face?
let's be honest. I mean, how you are going to participate on something on an international level when the international attention on you is about the internal crisis. So our position is now is not the time to focus on anything other than resolving this crisis. Now is not the time for high-level visits. Now is not the time for bilateral exchanges. Now is not the time to schedule a strategic bilateral dialogue. Now is the time to focus on this. Now, once we get out of crisis management, if we can do it together, hopefully, then maybe we can start to put that on track again. But the challenge there is, with every year that we lose, those exercises and those programs and that dialogue has to be planned a year in advance. So we've already lost a year. Our hope was that we could do something on the 15th anniversary of Kosovo's independence. But we can't because we have to focus on the crisis. So what other measures? The first one is we can't plan anything. And then we'll see from there.